So far, we've looked at art and immigration, poetry and activism, pop culture and media and identity, and now we're turning to, in a very real sense, classical music in our cities, which encompasses a lot of different elements. And I've learned not to try and regulate Michael Eisner's moderation, so I think I'll probably leave it at that as far as framing the panel, because God knows where he's going to go. But the original idea was to take one of our country and the world's greatest arts leaders, Deborah Borda, and talk to her about what it is to lead an orchestra in the 21st century in a major city like Los Angeles, and how does that relate to the work that goes on around the world, everything from classical music's place in our world to the role of how an orchestra relates to its city's demographics, to education initiatives, and on and on and on, and simply to being, as I said, one of the preeminent arts leaders that we are fortunate to have working in this country. So, by way of introduction, Deborah Borda, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, the nation's largest classical music organization. Prior to that, the New York Philharmonic. Let's just say I genuflect in front of Deborah Borda to say thank you for all of you have done to lead the arts in this country. And Michael Eisner, one of our country's most important entertainment leaders for many years, leading the way in so many instances of innovation and actually tapping into ideas that no one has thought of yet, and then they recognize as genius. So, Michael, I'm going to turn over to you and say thank you to you both for doing this panel.
Thank you, Damien. Welcome, Deborah. Thank you all for coming. If I had known Deborah Borda while I was in my heyday at Disney, she would be at Disney. This is the one of the best executives I've ever met. My wife sits on the board of the LA Symphony, and I hear chapter and verse of what goes on, and it all is impressive. As Damien said, it's the largest symphony in the United States. Deborah has turned it around, and the endowment from, I think, 44 million to 200 and something. The revenues are up, and that's just the financial good news. The creative good news is equally as attractive with Gustavo Dudamel, Disney Hall, an excitement in Los Angeles for event classical music, Mahler extravaganzas, new music, just a complete resurgence of an interest in downtown LA, a sense of place, a sense of architecture. I mean, it really is, for those of you who haven't been to LA in a long time, Deborah is the center of the change. So my first question, Deborah, is how did you get, oh, by the way, she also is responsible for the Hollywood Bowl. So I've been to the Hollywood Bowl, seen Deborah dance through Madonna and Neil Diamond and Disney and the management of a popular 18,000 seat venue to support Disney Hall and the LA Symphony is pretty amazing. But I'm mostly interested, because I had this problem in my previous life. How did you get planes to stop flying over during productions at the Hollywood Bowl? Because I know you did. I'm told you got it done.
Well, we gave a little luncheon. You know, one thing that makes people happy is having attention paid to them and giving them free food. So we gave, actually, it was sort of a cocktail party for the controllers and pilots, and we tried to convince them that if we had less planes flying over, we would have an even better party the next year. And then the other thing we do are those big, beautiful cross spotlights over the top of the bowl, which is sort of X marks the spot. Please don't fly here. But Michael, honestly, it doesn't work. We still have planes flying over.
Well, I had that problem at Angel Stadium, at Disney things. We went to Congress. It was probably easier to get than gun legislation, but
no, we didn't want to install guns to shoot them down.
Right.
That's true.
But Deborah, I am interested in one thing, because you started as a musician and you moved into administration. And it wasn't that you didn't, as far as I know, feel that you were going to be the greatest violinist or violist in the world. You actually got interested in the administration and the advancement of music in America. How did you cross that threshold?
You know, I think I had crossed the threshold sort of unconsciously earlier, which was in college and at the Royal College of Music. I was always the person in my string quartet who was sort of the quartet manager, the orchestra manager. I would negotiate the fees, I would get the music stands there, I would pick the program. So I was sort of headed in that direction, but I didn't think about it as a way a person could make their life.
Is that because you were
I was loving playing.
Innately the boss? You just like being
in
charge?
There are pictures of me when I'm 6 and everybody's much taller than me, as they always are, and I'm bossing everybody around, so I don't know. Actually, that's one of the secrets to my success, is that I'm sitting here and you can see my feet don't quite touch. I'm not too tall. Now, in my business, that's a great advantage because the maestros, you might not know this, they're all very short. Leonard Bernstein, Gustavo Dudamel, Riccardo Muti. The only maestro I was ever taller than was Eugene Ormandy. And this is a great advantage. So that wasn't how I got into it. I was at Tanglewood, and I was playing in the orchestra there. And I enjoyed going to the Boston Symphony rehearsals, because you learn a lot more at a rehearsal, actually, if you're a musician, than you do at a concert. And so I would be hanging around, and I had some friends in the Boston Symphony, and I noticed that there were these guys backstage, and they were dressed in the heat of the summer in suits, and very, very nice suits and ties. So I started asking, who are these guys? Because they weren't stagehands. I thought maybe they're stagehands. They said, there was one word for that. That's the management. So I thought, that's interesting, and I started to watch the management. And I realized that they were really helping to facilitate, so much of what was happening, and that they had real power in terms of their decision-making responsibilities. So I became more and more interested in that. I applied for a job at the Boston Symphony as a secretary, 7 or 8 times. I couldn't even get a job doing that. So I just kept on playing, and then just sort of gradually segued over into management.
Well, I look at the symphony and I look at the violinist or the bass player, and I think this is part of a team. They have tremendous identity because they create a sound, but they are completely lost in a group of strangers to me, as opposed to somebody who says, you know what, I don't want to be one of them, I want to run them. Was that part of it? Being stuck in, or is that just a different personality?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's being one of 12 violists is a little different from being the president and CEO.
So do they all want to do what you're doing?
No, actually, many of them don't. People, actually, I know it may seem surprising to people with our personalities, but Michael, there are people who enjoy being in the middle of the team, the inner voices, making things work in that way. And I guess...
I've never met such people. All right, so let me ask you a question. So now so the other myth, and by the way, I agree with what I think you're going to say, I'm not sure. I am a big advocate and tell people that are asking me about their children or their education, liberal arts, liberal arts, liberal arts. That's the way to go. But musicians and people that have really unique appeal, a unique talent in a certain area, want to go to conservatories. But you did that and then decided, you know what, Bennington would be better. Yeah. So how did you decide not to go to a trade school, so to speak, and go to where you would have a full agenda of education?
Yeah. Well, I went to a trade school at first because that's the path. If you're going to be a professional musician, you go to a trade school. It's sort of like learning to be a dentist or something. You learn how to do extractions and fillings, except they're orchestral excerpts and scales and things of that nature. So it's, I was there and I just felt sort of shut down and encased in a box. And so I wanted a liberal arts education. And I actually think that this is one of the real problems we have in music in America today, is that the big music schools and programs have essentially turned themselves in many ways into trade schools, which is not a good thing, because to be a musician today, you need to be much more entrepreneurial than we had to be back in the olden days. People have to understand websites, they have to produce their own concerts. It's a whole different world out there. And it's also a world where we have to think about social equity and justice and other issues as well. How do we develop an audience of tomorrow? How do we provide diversity? I mean, most of the music that orchestras play is music that was written in the 18th century. Well, that's not going to work in the future. So I think it's really important. It was important for me to start to look in a broader way. And I wish that that's what would happen with conservatories. And I would actually think about, if when people ask me, really talented musicians, I say, go to a liberal arts school. I mean, you know, yesterday at the opening session, we heard that the two most important leaders in the world who could actually change things were Pope Francis and Yo-Yo Ma. And actually, Yo-Yo Ma got his undergraduate degree at Harvard. He did not go to a music school.
Deborah spoke yesterday at the opening of the music school and was really articulate. It was a great speech about musicians today have to know what's going on in the world, have to be cognizant of racial issues, inner city issues, foreign issues, to be able to promote music and to understand the emotion of music. And it was really an excellent speech. I've talked to directors and asking them to help get one of my sons into a film school, and they would say, no, don't go to a film school, go to a liberal arts college. It's easy to know how to make a film. It's like learning to drive. The question is where to go. That's what counts. So I was impressed that you felt the same way. But do you feel that way for the musicians as well, or just for those people that are going to be kind of conducting them and corralling them and educating them?
No, I actually feel that for the musicians as well, very strongly. And you know, you could make a kind of a provocative statement like, let's outlaw the conservatories. But I would, you know, instead, let's get the conservatories to change and to integrate real thinking and liberal arts education, because a person has to be much more rounded. I mean, do you know how musicians prepare to get into great orchestras? They don't just learn pieces. I mean, the way they get in is that there is a book of orchestral excerpts. So you learn, say in Strauss' Ein Heldenleben, you learn the 7 passages that you are going to be called upon to play at the audition at these big orchestras, which take place behind screens. And that's what you learn. You don't learn the totality of looking at the score, of thinking about what is the meaning of Strauss and Ein Heldenleben, and all of the issues that go around it, the societal issues, the political issues, Zarathustra, all of these things. And I think it's critical for people to be educated in that way to truly, first of all, be their most authentic and realized selves, but also to be able to give voice to what we call classical music in this country, because it is really, right now, we're having a lot of trouble reaching people's hearts and minds.
All right, so let's just talk about how you manage this organization called the LA Symphony, because it is complicated. And I was with you in Amsterdam, and you had no responsibility.
That was great.
Well, you didn't act like you had no responsibility. The person was speaking, and it was going on forever. And you were looking at me and saying, how do I get this person off the stage? And I was thinking, well, you really, that's not your job here. But your job in the LA Philharmonic is so immense in union negotiations, creative negotiations, picking the programming, ushers, funders. People criticize the board of all these institutions as a club of billionaires, and how do you get around that, and how do you use them, and all the things you have to do, which aren't only about following Dudamel around the world and making sure he's happy and making sure he signs his next contract because Dudamel is a star and so forth. I mean, it is like running General Motors, but you run well, and so maybe they should hire you at General Motors. But tell me about how you do it. What are the things that you have to, when you wake up in the morning and you have to face what's going to happen?
Well, I think it's fascinating how management styles have evolved over the past 30 or 40 years, because my mentor, when my first big job was as artistic administrator at the San Francisco Symphony, and my mentor was the CEO, Peter Pastreich, and it was very much top-down kind of management in those days. Brilliant guy. We would get together with the senior group. We would put the problem out there. He would magically come up with a solution, and we would follow it. But it was a very different time, and things have become so much, I think, the complexity of our institutions right now, of our society, the profound changes that the digital age has brought to us, really made me start to think about how is it that we can, there was about a period about 7 or 8 years ago where I was feeling I'm just not very good at what I do. And I realized I was trying to, it was even further back than that, I was trying to manage too much. And in fact, I think what I learned was, and which many managers have learned, was to hire a fantastic group of people, give them all the information you can, let them train themselves as well as they can, and you can help them. And then basically my rule is, I want to do what I can do best and that nobody else can do. I want to have a group of people that is focused on what the vision of the institution is. I'm going to hold them responsible. There are going to be measurable ways that we know if things are working or not. And so, you know, I don't worry about the ushers. I mean, if I see something go wrong, sure, it bothers me.
This is not true.
Well,
this is just not true.
Well,
let me ask you a question.
okay.
And I think micromanagement is
No,
right kind. It's good. Wait a second. I think the micromanagement means you're a aware manager. It doesn't mean you're picking up every piece of paper.
But you should if you see it.
Yes, and and the people that work for you
Better
should know
do-
that you would if they don't.
Sure.
So are you a micromanager? Do you
I
look
can't
at the
answer
ushers?
that.
Do you look at where they
Oh,
are?
sure.
Yeah, so you are a micromanager.
Well, I mean, of course. I mean, I don't know if you call that a micromanager. I have awareness.
Well,
I
who
have
worries
awareness.
about when you have a weakness in the string section? You obviously you talked to Dudamel about that.
Yeah. Well, he talks to me about it,
Okay.
actually.
So who worries about making the program commercial yet innovative, new music yet the standards? Who talks about that?
Yeah, you see, when this gets to my having to have input on it or wanting to have input on it, it's at a pretty developed point because we've laid a really terrific foundation of how people work and the people that work there and what the vision is for what we're trying to do at the organization. So I don't know if I'd call myself a micromanager. I am interested in all things
I
great
see you
and
at every
small.
performance.
No, you don't.
Everyone I'm at, which is not all of them.
Well, that's...
Well, no, I think you're a great manager, and I think being a manager who knows what's going on around the world. When Dudamel travels around the world, he seems to have somebody there with him, and it seems to be you.
No.
Often-
No. I go visit him.
Oh, please! This is your star. This is your Leonardo DiCaprio. You got to make sure.
But I have 106 people in the Los Angeles Philharmonic. We have a staff of 132. We have a board of directors of 60. We have our community. We have Yola. So what I've got to figure out is how best to, in terms of resource allocation, me being the resource, how best to divide my time up and to figure out where I can have the greatest impact and
right.
where my decision can move something to a different place.
All right, so let's talk about Yola.
Okay.
So,
Do people know what Yola is? No. Okay.
Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles, and Deborah and Dudamel, who came out of El Sistema in Venezuela, inner city kids joining and becoming musicians. This was unknown in Los Angeles. And Deborah and Dudamel have made this. Yeah. And how did you get it to be so important in Los Angeles and the whole West Coast?
Yeah. So El Sistema is a philosophy of training that comes from Venezuela. Jose Antonio Abreu thought this up. And the issue is you go into profoundly underserved areas and you provide intensive, like every day of the week, music education. And the metaphor is that playing in an orchestra is a metaphor for teamwork, good citizenship, being just a good human being. And the point is not to produce professional musicians, although in fact it has produced many wonderful professional musicians, Gustavo Dudamel among them. It is to really produce great people, great citizens. So I was trying to get Gustavo Dudamel signed up as our music director. And I couldn't get him to sign the contract. I'd sort of
By the
stalked
way,
him.
that was the first brilliant move.
Yeah, he was a baby when we signed him.
Yeah, how did you find him?
Well, he won something called the International Mahler Competition, and my friend Esa-Pekka Salonen, who was the music director of the LA Philharmonic at the time, called me up, and it was sort of late in the afternoon. It was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon in LA, and he was calling me from Bamberg, Germany. So he was a little happy when he called. You can imagine. He said, "Oh, you won't believe what happened. This incredible 24-year-old just won the Mahler competition." I said, "Yeah, tell me about it." He goes, "Well, he's about 24, doesn't speak English, he doesn't speak German, but he just conducted the best Mahler 5 I've heard in my life." So I go, "Well, how would you describe his style?" And he goes, "Oh, he's a conducting animal." So we chatted more. We have a really close relationship. So I said, "Well, what if we take a chance and invite him to the Hollywood Bowl and give him a concert and see if it's as good as you say it is," because it sounded pretty interesting. So he said, "Yeah, let's do it." So the next morning I called and I tried to book this guy, Gustavo Dudamel, who I couldn't even find online. I mean, I just didn't know anything. And he didn't have a manager. So the next day after that, he had 3 managers. And one of them stuck, and we booked him. And he made his debut at the Hollywood Bowl, and it was spontaneous combustion. You could tell this was a once-in-a-100-year kind of talent.
But you're making my case. This is a real manager.
Yeah.
There's a star somewhere in the out there. There's Frank Gehry doing this building. There's Deborah been hired from New York, which was a hard decision to leave New York. A lot of people wouldn't do that. And all of a sudden you get the final piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Frank Gehry, Dudamel.
But I couldn't.
Pretty good.
Yeah, but I couldn't get Dudamel. That was the problem. I sort of followed him around, and at first you'd go to places like Wuppertal or something to see him.
You stalked him.
Yeah, I did a little bit.
Right.
And then
I mean, let's put it right on the line. You went.
Yeah.
You, as like an agent or an executive, you decided this is what's needed, and you went and got him.
My worst moment was his debut with the Boston Symphony at Tanglewood. And I was sitting there, and from the right came in the artistic committee from the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and from the left side, my friends from the New York Philharmonic. And I thought, so I went to Venezuela. That was the thing. Because I thought, if I'm going to get this guy to sign up, I'm missing something. I have to understand his roots. So I went to Venezuela, and I spent almost 10 days there. And I traveled around the country seeing all of these nucleos, because El Sistema is, I've described it, but it's a series. It's not one school or one orchestra. There are hundreds of them. It serves a half million
I'm
kids.
turning this off.
Okay, 500,000 kids in the country. And it was life-changing for me to see it. It was just profound to see. You could go into there. One nucleo was in the basement of a racetrack. The other was you climbed up to the top of a barrio where they had running water down the middle of the street and no electricity. And there would be orchestras there and kids playing and making music very beautifully. And you would see kids who couldn't play sitting next to kids who could, but they would, the part of the philosophy is you play right away, so they would put soap on their bows so they could fake playing and then learn how to play later on. I got to know Jose Antonio Abreu. So finally, the moment comes, and I think I'm going to get him to sign the contract. This is going to be it.
And he comes out of El Sistema.
Yeah, he is the product of El Sistema. He was first a violinist. He's a great violinist, by the way.
Have you played together with him?
No.
Why not?
I don't play anymore. I have nightmares about this. I'll tell you my recurring nightmare if you want to hear it in a minute.
We're going to go get that done.
But at any rate, and so he started conducting when he was 11. So when he conducts a Mahler cycle, if he does all 9 symphonies, they're memorized. He has them in his mind.
He never reads music. Yeah. It's frightening.
So at any rate, I go and I think this is it. He's going to sign the contract. He won't do it. He doesn't do it. But when I got on the plane, I literally, and it's one of the few times actually the only time I remember doing this, I made a vow to myself that I took very seriously, which was that when I got back to Los Angeles, we would start El Sistema in Los Angeles, that I saw a future and that it was important in so many different ways. And so when I got back, we started thinking about it, and El Sistema works in Venezuela because it's very dictatorial, and it's what you need in a kind of what has now become, sadly, a third world country. But as we started researching and thinking about how to do it in Los Angeles and the United States, we needed to develop a very different model, because sometimes you think at a great big LA Phil institution. You can go into the community and tell people what they want, what we think is good for them. But it doesn't work that way. You have to listen to people and see what they think about. So we did a different model. We formed nucleos in different places in partnerships with community centers and charter schools. And it was interesting because when I first proposed it, people were a little nervous about it. The board of directors was not thrilled about it, although they are now. They said, well, this is like adopting a child. Once we start it, we have to do it. The orchestra wasn't thrilled about it. What would the cost be? But it's found a way into people's hearts, I think, in Los Angeles. And we now have a number of nucleos and really major plans to expand it further.
And it's moved to other places in the United States, up and down the West Coast. And describe what's happening tonight at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, actually, there are lots of educational institutions and orchestras are trying to do this good and really important work. So they have formed their own El Sistema programs, nucleos, YOLA, whatever you want to call it. They call it, in Baltimore, for example, it has a cute name, it's called Orc Kids. And so people are working very hard, but it's disparate, it's all over. So we thought we would form at the LA Phil a music education initiative called Take a Stand. And we would have a place with a website and a convening so that these different disparate El Sistema philosophies and programs throughout the country could come together. And I invite you tonight at 6 o'clock over in the Benedict Music Tent. We have the Western Regional Take a Stand Orchestra, and they're going to be giving a concert. And it's 100 kids from all up and down the West Coast, many of them from LA, but the furthest come from, I think, Anchorage, Alaska. They were at the opening yesterday. You could see them.
Conducted
by two people, our music director of YOLA, Juan Felipe Melono, and Robert Smano will also conduct them. And this is the first. In 2 weeks, we go to Bard College, where this is the West Coast Regional Orchestra. Then we have in 2 weeks, the East Coast Regional YOLA Orchestra, or Take a Stand Orchestra, sorry. And then next year is actually the 10th anniversary of YOLA, and we're bringing everybody together, the East Coast and the West Coast, and Gustavo Dudamel will conduct a concert at Walt Disney Concert Hall in the Hollywood Bowl with this big
And this is not
orchestra.
just to find the great new musicians. This is to give inner city kids a community, part of a group, learn a new discipline, be with Dudamel and all the rest of them.
Yeah.
And tonight, they introduced these 100 kids yesterday at the opening, and they're all going to perform tonight, from Brahms to Star Wars.
Yeah.
It won't be up to the LA Symphony quality, but they're cuter, I'll tell you that.
Gustavo says something that is so true. Gustavo, when he said this to me, it was one of those moments that, again, it was a statement. It sounds maybe slightly dramatic, but it changed my life, and that as El Sistema did, in thinking about how we approach music and how we approach the LA Phil, whether it's Beethoven or Mahler or something John Adams. And what Gustavo said was, music is a fundamental human right. And that was just a profound way of thinking about it for me. And to be able to provide this in places that it would not be provided, and to know that we're not necessarily, although we hope we'll get some of the next violinists for the LA Phil, that these kids are going to be teachers, they're going to be doctors, they're going to be supervisors. They're going to have a life which has been enriched and made larger and more perceptive and acute through music.
Actually, everybody, once you're told somebody's a star, like Dudamel's a star, it seems obvious. But when you see Dudamel conducting these kids in one of their concerts and getting their attention and using his personality to keep them interested, you really see how talented he is. So how, in America, in Los Angeles, how do you track art versus commerce? How do you track getting all the old people to give a seat to young people? How do you get music that is sometimes more difficult to appeal to a younger audience? How does that happen? How do you age down the audience for the LA Phil?
It's a major challenge. The tectonic plates of society are shifting, as we know, but in addition to that, how people consume culture is very, very different from how they used to, what they're interested in, not only what they're interested in, but how they go. So in the old days, My parents would buy 10 Tuesday nights to the New York Philharmonic, and they would go. People don't subscribe anymore. It's an on-demand society. It's a society where you just had to turn your phone off, where we go for whatever we decide, I want to do this right now, and I'm going to get the best bargain I can get, and I'm going to have the most flexibility. When I look at our staff, they don't have landlines. They don't watch what we used to call television. I mean, they stream things. They don't own cars. And that's the way things are moving. When you go to a museum, you can walk through a museum at your own pace. You can dress however you want to dress. When you go to a concert, it's a much more abstract and confining kind of experience, unless you start thinking about ways to make it different. So this is one of the major challenges that arts institutions face, but especially musical institutions, because so much of what we do in a way takes away some freedom from how you can make the choices, because we do choose the programs. And so what we're finding is, first of all, using multimedia presentations, collaborating across media, not media, but collaborating across artistic lines, bringing in different kinds of people, thinking about what time should we do concerts, what should the format be, what are we going to show with it, do we have thematic programming, are there intellectual themes that will run through the season. These are all issues that you have to constantly keep reworking and thinking about.
So how many people fight you on that? How, you've had some not historic, but written about arguments with some of the maestros, and people are in the dark ages, and you're bringing in new ideas. You've tried and failed on some things, because without failure you don't get anything going forward. How do you break down the barriers of this is the way it was done 50 years ago and we're not changing? Because that is a big...
Yeah, it's hard. And that was actually, it was a very difficult decision for me to leave the New York Philharmonic. And I'd been there 10 years. But that was actually what went into it, which was I felt that it's America's oldest orchestra. I think it's 170 some years old now. And it's a great, great orchestra, great institution. But I felt the weight of our legend was sort of pressing us down. And I felt each day that when I went to work, I was more and more confined in a kind of box. And when the possibility came of the opening of Walt Disney Concert Hall, working with Esa-Pekka Salonen, this whole new world of the crazy Hollywood Bowl with the planes flying over and the pops, it was just interesting, and it gave a way actually to not have to fight with old European maestros, and to work in a very different way. Because one of the great things that, and you experience this living in Los Angeles, you're a New Yorker originally, is that when you have an idea there and you bring it up to people, they're then, oh, well, we tried that, or no, we can't do that. People, tell us about it. And if you can sell it and if you can shape it, you can do it.
So the LA Philharmonic is financially sound. It has less support, actually, because it's hard to find the kind of support in LA that you can find in New York, but it has support. But it's very successful, and orchestras in the rest of the country are generally not. Now, obviously, the Hollywood Bowl helps, but when you talk to your fellow CEOs of orchestras, do they say to you, how come you're not going out of business?
Well, a lot of it has to do with, it's not rocket science thinking about this. You can't spend more than you take in, and taking in a not-for-profit institution. Part of it is earned revenue, but a great deal of it, as you know, is contributed revenue. So you've got to have a very robust fundraising.
Do you tell them to go to IKEA to do their office the way you did, and watch the pennies, or
that was in the old days.
Right. Well, I read that somewhere that you threw out all this very valuable furniture and went to IKEA and said...
We sold it, actually.
You sold it and said, this is the model. You can't spend your way into oblivion.
Yeah. Well, when
that's like a good executive does that.
Yeah. When I got to the Los Angeles Philharmonic, it was sort of in rough shape. It had an extremely large operating deficit, and had it had been through some very difficult times. And one of the things as a new CEO, when you go in, and you have to sort of shake things up right away. You have to make some very quick personnel decisions about who's on the bus and who you want on the bus and who you don't want on the bus. And Caspar Gerhardt, who was the president of Stanford, called it the six-shooter theory of management. And he said when you first went to a job, you had a six-shooter. And what you should do is quickly fire off a couple of shots because that impressed people and it showed people the direction you were going to go in. And then, of course,
rough.
so,
Okay.
so then think this through. And then he said, but what happens when you get and you realize you only have one bullet left?
Shoot yourself.
Or reload.
Or reload. All right, so talking about that. So you find out you come to the LA Philharmonic and the piccolo player, who's been there for 45 years, doesn't quite have it anymore. It's not quite as easy as taking out the gun and getting rid of the piccolo player.
That would be one way.
Yeah, but that doesn't work.
No.
So how do you keep a aging institution with a new conductor contemporary when you have unions and protocol and blind auditions or not blind auditions? How do you keep an orchestra vital that has been around so long?
Well, there's a whole, it's a complex question. The first thing, though, is if you're not genuinely engaging the musicians in the life of the institution, in excitement about the art that they're creating, in providing them and helping them to buy into and help shape a vision of what the institution could be. So it's not just some old Philharmonic sitting there, it's larger than that. And that if they feel a part of that, they will actually join with you in labor negotiations. And yes, labor negotiations are about money, but thinking about how these larger issues can be shaped and addressed. And we work with a very forward-looking group of people, but you have to have unity throughout the organization, because the board of directors certainly has to feel that way. And
but how do you get rid of
the
the person who's
lost
his hearing?
Okay.
Who's stuck there because the union says he's got to play for another 5 years?
Yeah, we have, what Michael's referring to in major American orchestras, we have very strict union contracts, and basically it's very, very difficult to terminate a player. So there's a very described process that takes, if we want to make a change in the orchestra, that takes 2 years. It involves a committee from the orchestra. It involves the music director and me, multiple meetings. And so you actually have to have the courage to carry those out, and you have to engage with whoever the maestro is. And Gustavo's been amazing at this because it's very uncomfortable. You have to sit down and start the process and talk things through. And it's like a garden. There are things you have to do to keep your garden, vital and replanted. But, and you have to appeal, I think, on a certain level to people who have been, first of all, think of how much these people like their jobs. They've been sitting there. Suddenly there's an orchestra that's at the top of the world, top paid orchestra in the country. They're loving what they're doing. It's very hard. You have to have some humanity in thinking about
so they're
how they go.
They're the top paid?
Yes, they are. Yes,
Well, that helps.
Yeah, that helps. But that helps you not to want to leave also. And so you have to appeal sometimes to their own citizenship and their own humanity to think of, you've had such a great run here. What are you thinking about for your next couple of years? But the only way you can do that is if you've actually followed through in the aspects of actually enforcing the contract and going through these termination procedures. And it is extremely unpleasant.
I'm sure you've seen Mozart in the Jungle, which is the Amazon Prime television series.
I'm in it.
Well, that's what I want to know. Is she, who plays it?
Bernadette Peters plays
Bernadette
me.
Peters. Is Bernadette, are you following her advice or is she following your advice?
Well,
which is the real twin here?
I don't know. Do you think I should wear dresses that low cut to work? Maybe it
Why
would help
not?
our fundraising.
No, but have you talked to her?
Yeah, she called me up. I talked to the people at Mozart in the Jungle. I know them very well. They're great. They really care about music, and they're trying to. I think they have really high production values. It's beautifully shot. It's well written, and it's a fun story. And I think it's great in terms of a demystification of classical music. And did you see the episode where Gustavo Dudamel plays the stagehand?
I did.
It's great.
By the way, on Amazon Prime, that and Transparent,
The two hits.
Mozart and the Jungle, the two hits, and really have made Amazon, who's everything else in the world, now a pretty effective entertainment source. So another question, and then I think, do we do Q&A? Get in? Yeah, all right, so just as my last question, we'll go to Q&A. There's this woman in your orchestra who I've never seen in any other orchestra, who goes wild. She's fantastic. The violist.
Principal violist, Carrie
And I think
Dennis.
it's great that you let her do it. I mean, my eyes are, this is not a person you see in any other orchestra. Everybody else is like this, and she is all over the place. I think that's very theatrical.
Yeah.
Do you have conversations that we better tone her down, or let her do what she does, or is she any good?
Okay.
What happened? I want to know
First
about
of
this
all,
woman.
Okay, first of all, great violist. We hired her from the Berlin Philharmonic, where she was the principal viola at, I think, 28 years old.
Yeah,
of
she's
the
young.
Berlin Philharmonic, yeah. So she is one great player. Now, have you ever seen the Simon Bolivar orchestra play, Gustavo Dudamel's other orchestra?
Yes, once.
Those guys are moving around, and it's a whole scene. He loves the way she plays, and I love the way she plays. She's a great player, and we're not going to say don't move, but I will tell you this. Every year I get about 5 or 6 letters from audience members complaining.
Oh, the old ones, the old people.
Yeah, so I have my
Oh.
letter, about why we encourage her to move, and we love it, and she's a great player. But it is remarkable to me, that people would complain about this. She's completely
Let me tell
engaged.
you, if you don't know that much about music, and it's a little boring at some point, just watch her. She's totally entertaining. She makes it work. Anyway, let's open it up for questions. Right here in the blue.
Hi, I'm Constance Hogue. I'm a subscriber.
I know who you are.
There's that way that we have.
Oh, okay.
There's a thing there.
Could you comment, is this working? On the state of composing, and how does classical music in any way relate to all this rock and stuff that the kids listen to, and what can we do to increase the accessibility of some of the modern composers? I don't know what's happening with composers.
Well, that's an immense question, that you're asking. So let me try and focus in on one part of it. And I spoke a little bit about this before. If you were living in the time of Brahms or Beethoven or Schubert or Mahler, you listened to the music of your time. Now, what's the difference? The difference here is that in our time, many orchestras don't play music of our time. They are still playing Haydn and Mozart and Brahms, which are all great. They're wonderful. But if you ran a truly comprehensive and great museum, you would have a comprehensive collection of art. But you would be really focusing, I think, and this is a critical, I think, mistake that American orchestras have made and other orchestras. You really need to focus on generative art, new art that is being created. And in Los Angeles, and people don't believe this, but when I say it, but we do so much 20th and 21st century music, I can't tell you. It's at least half of our programming, and we have tremendous attendance. And I think we have brought the audience along in terms of, I know we've brought the audience along in terms of opening their ears. And you should see, we have a very young audience who comes to the LA Phil. And I think if you're open to listening to really contemporary rock or popular music, it's a very easy crossover. So I think for us, it is just so critical to always on every program present music of our time. So we, in fact, I think one of the ways we've also been successful is we have a lot of different kinds of collaborations and curatorial staff who come in and advise us. So our creative chair is the composer John Adams. And in his position as creative chair, he's not just thinking about contemporary music. He's looking at our overall programs, helping us to think about how we make this as a regular part of our life, not just some kind of add-on that, the worst thing to me is when you go to a concert and you see they're going to have like a Beethoven symphony and this and that, but you're going to have a 5-minute piece at the beginning by so-and-so. And because you wouldn't want to do a big full work at the end. We also we do 20 world premieres and commissions on our program, on our winter program every single season. So I think the best way, as I always say, best way to predict the future is to invent it. We've got to do music of our time.
When we had the millennium, 2000, Deborah was in New York, and Disney Company
This is how I met Michael, actually.
Did a Michael Torke, Aaron Kernis, 2 composers, Millennial Symphony, with kids and flags and Disney type of stuff, but that's where we first met. I knew nothing about what I was doing, so we had Deborah, but it was kind of exciting.
Were you a micromanager?
When I gave notes to them, they looked at me like, what are you talking about?
I saw that, it's true.
And when I said, we have to own the publishing, they were not too happy about that either. But anyway, it turned out to be pretty good. And tonight, by the way, I think the Yola type kids are doing not only Brahms, but they're doing Star Wars, and so they're doing a whole
We do all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
sorts of stuff. Back there in the blue shirt, the man with the glasses. Identify yourself and ask your question.
My name is Bob Hoffman. I'm on the board of the Atlantic Classical Orchestra, which plays in 3 cities in Florida, Palm Beach, Stewart, and Vero Beach. Our clientele, the people that come to listen to the music, arrive in December and depart in March, go back north. And so we have a constant problem of financing the orchestra. And one of the things we've found, but we're neophytes at it yet, is the outreach to the community. And in the sense of doing things with kids, as you have obviously done a lot, that what happens is that there's an impact on the community which goes beyond the good that it does the child. And it really lifts the community. It has effects on families, on crime rate, and so on. Could you talk a little bit more about the outreach that you've done with the orchestra in LA and whether it impacts your fundraising? Because we found that there are people who normally wouldn't give to the orchestra in order to be able to listen to the music. But when they see that it does good to the community, they're willing to give for that reason.
So your question is, does looking for, here's the dilemma, I think, or a question that we need to consider when we run any big artistic institution. And that is, in this 21st century, how do we think about the artistic imperative, the high art, and how do we think about the social imperative? And where is the intersection? How do we meaningfully define that? And that's something you're thinking about, and that's great. And I think society is demanding increasingly that we think about it, and they respond because they see the rightness of it. Now, the trick is, and this is the challenge, which is, how do we do this and remain true to building on a foundation of artistic excellence? Because you can't just suddenly let everything go. So this is what's so exciting. This is the mishmash of things that are happening today. You have a specific challenge because you can't build your audience over the whole year because what do you call them, snowbirds? They go back and forth. See, we have the advantage in Los Angeles that it never snows, but that we have an entire year to work with people and to curate and to help our audience grow and to help us grow. So I encourage you to keep doing that. And the orchestra, the members of the orchestra were concerned when we first started Yola because we had come through a very difficult financial time. But they're always concerned about their own livelihood, as they should be. And I can honestly say that this has so strengthened our fundraising and our position in the community. But it's definitely good and important work that has a payoff.
Right here in the front. Yes. We have to wait for them.
Hi, Chris Eggemeyer. I'm curious, you made the transition from New York to LA, and I think as anybody who's experienced both cities know, they're very different in a number of ways, but especially culturally, where or at least from an outsider's perspective, the center of New York culture seems much more oriented towards music and theater, where LA is really the center of film and television, not only in the United States, but internationally. And I know you touched a little bit on some of the differences, but I was wondering if there were any unique challenges to taking this project in a city like LA as opposed to one like New York.
Well, there are profound differences. The first year I was in LA, if we didn't have the project of trying to get Walt Disney Concert Hall up and built, and it was a shock for me. I couldn't drive when I got there, so that was one problem. And some people would still say I can't. But you know what I find today, and LA has really just so changed in the past decade. The building of Walt Disney Concert Hall, It's a vibrant music community. There are all sorts of new music groups, all sorts of chamber orchestras, chamber ensembles. We have great music schools there, the Thornton School at USC, the Colburn School. There's a lot going on, and I think and also we have a really, there's been a great exodus of artists from the East Coast to the West Coast not just because it doesn't snow, but because there's affordable places that they can have studios and light to work in. So I think that the perception, and this sort of, as a New Yorker, this really bothers me, but the perception from the East Coast of what is happening in Los Angeles is out of whack. They don't understand the vitality and the excitement of what is happening in Los Angeles, in this time, and it all sort of bothers me because whenever we do something, we'll do something innovative, and then the New York Times will send somebody to cover it, and the guy will cover it, and he will find the one person in the city who will speak about it, and it's always, you're always sort of, well, it's on the West Coast, so I'm excited to live in LA, and I'm excited to be in the midst of what is really a vibrant arts community, and I think really highly informed by all the creative people that live there and move there. And so the entertainment industry has writers, it has people who are set designers. It's a profoundly creative place. And for that reason, I think maybe we do have an easier time, because I don't know if we have an easier time because we had to envision it, but in terms of appealing to a broader genre of people.
You must not come from LA, because that question...
That's a typical New Yorker's question, isn't it?
Right, and I am also a Manhattan-born and educated person who moved to LA. And the great thing that the LA Philharmonic did is to bring in a type A leader. Because as soon as you have a type A leader from New York, it turns into New York. So...
Oh, no, Michael! Oh!
Wait a second, I can speak from experience.
Actually, this guy's from Dubuque, Iowa.
No,
I'm a San Diegan.
no. When I moved to LA, all I had to do was wear a suit and tie.
Me too.
And it changed the office, because people were wandering in and they were leaving at 4 and they were playing cards during lunch. And all you had to do was wear a suit and tie, and all of a sudden, people were the same.
I had an even worse thing. When I got there from New York and I had my clothes, people would come in shorts and flip-flops.
Yeah, right.
And you know what? It's okay.
By the way, we did, now I'm getting defensive, but we did all right in New York in theater, Lion King and so forth. So I think what LA has is, first of all, a lot of people, a lot of diversity, which is why YOLA is so important. It has, it's so broad in the real estate that it's so hard to get around. The biggest problem is I was talking to, why am I into this? My wife saying, why don't we raise money, which we're not going to do, to build a concert hall, one in West LA, one in because getting to Disney Hall is a nightmare.
Because we need public transportation. Because we have and we are starting to do it, because we have one of the great concert halls in the entire world, acoustically, in terms of flexibility, in terms of beauty. When you get off a plane in Switzerland, there'll be an ad for a car, and they'll have a picture of Walt Disney Concert Hall behind it. So, I mean, this is part of why I think orchestra managers have to think more than just about whether the piccolo player is going to be replaced.
There now is a rapid train from Santa Monica to Disney Hall. Unlike New York, they have 2 tracks instead of 4, so there's no express. It's quicker to walk. I swear to God, it stops three times at USC. It just opened. So they have some work to do in that.
They're doing it.
A couple more questions right here in the white.
Don't bash LA.
No, I like LA. I like LA.
We got guys from San Diego who are going to do it.
I know, I like LA.
I can't tell.
Sorry.
Hi, my name is Georgette Phillips. I'm not from New York or Los Angeles. From Philadelphia. I'm a lifelong musician. I started playing when I was in the 3rd grade, and I was introduced to playing through the public school system. And what has been most disheartening to me in the recent past is the dismantling of music education programs in our public schools. I am heartened by the efforts that various orchestras and various foundations are making to introduce music to children, but is this a replacement or is this in addition to? And I think it's a replacement, and should we be doing anything about that in terms of reintroducing music into our public school system?
Well, of course, the most critical factor about whether somebody is going to enjoy music and actually attend a concert later in life, there's a very quantifiable measurement. It's, did they do one of three things? Play an instrument in orchestra or band, sing in a choir, or play the piano. So these are the three things. So you probably did all of the above, right? And as we know, it has been music education got cut way before any sports got cut. So in different places, different people are taking different places, different cities have to take different organic approaches for their own cities. For us, we originally, and this is a sad story actually, we did try to work with the with the LA Schools Department, and we found that the bureaucracy was so not open to it and so inflexible. We could have spent all of our time trying to do something that would have moved the meter, that far, and then would have, when the next person came in or the board could have been taken away. So we decided, as other institutions are doing, to try and actually take it on and do it ourselves. At the New York Philharmonic, we formed school partnerships, as I said, Orchids in Baltimore. We have Viola. This is happening all over. And the beautiful, beautiful part of this is that it is rising up as a grassroots kind of movement. Now, will it be reintroduced into the schools? Because that's how I started to play. They had an orchestra and you could go and pick your instrument. I wanted to play the flute. I was at the back of the line, so I had a choice. I could either do the violin or the French horn, and the violin looked easier to carry, so I picked the violin. But it's a real issue of how, and these are kind of judgments you have to make. When can you actually change the bureaucracy, or when do you say, I'm going to stop this right here because I can't do it, because I'm going to go off in another direction, and we are really going to make change, and we're going to do it, one school at a time and grow up, out and out. And so we have plans to expand Yola greatly, and we also have plans to really try and support this national movement, Take a Stand, which is all of these. But it is a sad, sad story, a really tragic story that music education has been removed from the schools.
Last question on a not sad story.
Well, maybe it's sad. We don't know.
Right. I'm prompting.
Could be. Okay.
Jason
Upbeat,
Saul,
please.
I'm from Chicago and lifelong attendee of Chicago Symphony. One of the challenges I wanted to ask you about is how do we reinvent the business model of the symphony? Because one of the challenges I'm seeing is when I go to the symphony, there are all these corporate sponsors and all the foundations funding it, yet the tickets are still $200, $300, $400 a seat. Most people in their 20s and 30s just can't afford it. And so the question is, what are we going to do to reinvent the business model? Because I don't think it's sustainable to continue to subsidize things forever, and the prices are still out of reach of most people in their 20s and 30s, other than a few subsidized seats that they give away for free.
Well, I'm amazed you guys have $400 tickets. Wow. Oof, that's a deep breath. Because, at most halls, that would be a remarkable price. Most halls have tickets. For example, every single concert we have. At the Hollywood Bowl, we have hundreds of tickets that are literally available for $1, and the bottom price ticket at Walt Disney Concert Hall is $15. So it's certainly accessible, and we do not have $400 or $300 or $200 tickets. But let me go back to your other question, because I think you're talking about what is a very potentially dangerous misconception. And that is that we can run a symphony orchestra or an opera company like a widget factory, that we can somehow either increase our productivity or decrease our costs so that it somehow runs at a profit. It took 100 people to play a Beethoven symphony in Beethoven's time. It still takes 100 people. When you sell out Walt Disney Concert Hall or David Geffen Hall or Orchestra Hall in Chicago, this covers less than half of the cost of putting the concert on. And what is involved in that cost? That is paying living wages and good wages for the musicians. That is the cost to market it. That is the cost to produce the concert and put it on. So we can never run these places as for-profit institutions. And it's really, I think, a disservice to think of it in that way. This is like a hospital. This is like a school. This is a human and community service. And so, yes, we will do our best to operate the place efficiently, and probably about the best we can do is to earn between 40 to 55 or 60%, and that would be at the high end. But the rest has to be supported by the community, and we have to build that case for why music matters, why it is important for society, to reflect beyond just making money or going to sports events. But the enrichment that comes from music in terms of celebration of the important parts of our lives, community togetherness, personal reflection. This is why I think many people in the room here really adore music, and it's very important to them. But one of the key things that we spend time with our board, and our board understands it very well, is we cannot run these like profit-making institutions. They're not. That's why we're not for profits. And otherwise, we could play electronic versions of Beethoven's Ninth. And I don't want to do that.
So our hour is up. Thank you very much.